So these will be our main presenters who will talk about the approach, the background, and the experience of Thai Baan. And partly they'll be drawing on, I believe, a research. This Thai Baan research has been going now for about 20 years. And our Thai friends have been involved in a review of this experience funded by the Thai Research Fund. After our speakers, we will invite Professor Surachai Wangale from the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand to reflect on some of the presentations and discussions. And we will also invite another colleague, Peter Rossett, to reflect on some experience from other parts of the world in related approaches. So the basic structure of the day, we've got quite a lot to get through. The basic structure will be each of our speakers will speak for 10 minutes. We'll open up for questions, really of clarification after each of the speakers. And then when we've gone through all of the speakers, we'll open up for a broader discussion. As always, you can put your questions at any time in the chat, or you can raise your hand electronically or physically. And we're in a reasonably small group, so feel free to join in as you see fit. Okay, so I think without any further ado, I would like to invite Ajahn Chayan to begin the proceedings with his presentation. And in many ways, sorry, I should have said Ajahn Chayan has been the sort of inspiration behind the Thai Baan research approach. So it's wonderful that Ajahn Chayan has the time to present to us this morning. So over to you, please, Ajahn.
Thank you, Richard. And good morning, colleagues from York, and also good afternoon or good evening, colleagues from Thailand. I would like to share screen just a few minutes. So for some of you who are just arrived, my name is Chayan Wattanaputi. I'm with the Regional Center for Social Science and Sustainable Development, Faculty of Social Science, Chiang Mai University. At the beginning, I would like to emphasize that Thai Baan is a Thai term which has been adopted by the villagers who start to develop these research 20 years ago. They want to say that this is a research, this is a villagers research, which is not a study of villages by conventional approach, but it's a research done by villagers in collaboration with NGOs and academics, right? And it was Thai Baan was developed around 1998 in the middle of the struggle to protect the villagers' livelihood affected by the state development project, particularly in the northeast and northern Thailand. For us and for villagers, this is a strategic approach to open up space for villagers to assert their identity, make their local ecological knowledge legible, and representing local meanings of environment, livelihoods, and development. It is also an attempt to use knowledge in changing power relation and defending villagers' right to social justice. Thai Baan research, in my view, was influenced by Paulo Freire's conscientization approach, which aims to raise consciousness of villagers or farmers living in poverty and under exploitation. It also adopts the participatory action research, which was employed by the Thai NGOs and academics working during 1990s in understanding how local people manage their community forest. Research was meant to find a solution to their problem, as well as empowering the people. But Thai Baan for the villagers and for us means this is a research led by villagers. The researcher, in this case, means sociologists, anthropologists, are the supporter, are collaborator. It is a counter-hegemonic approach which produces a set of knowledge different from the dominant knowledge often used by the state. So the Thai Baan emphasizes the role of villagers as led researchers collecting data by using mixed methods such as focus group interviewing, mapping, oral history, observation of reality around them. The villagers researchers study their own social reality, their relationship with environment, the way they classify and use their resources such as forest, river, land, plants, fish, animal, etc., etc. They also pay attention to local terms, describe local cultural meanings of nature, as well as the relationship between themselves and environment and the changes which impact upon them. Villagers do not only classify data that they collected, but they also analyze data which they collected. Sometimes it's done under collaboration and support or facilitated by academics and NGO. It's not just the classification of fish species or plants or the different ecological settings in the environment, in the river, or in the forest, but also explain explain the social relation and their relationship with nature, flows of nature, flows of water, like in the case of Baan River. Baan is the river in the northeast where is the place which is a place where Thai Baan research originated. They have they have knowledge about migration of the fish, or they analyze the migration of fish, circulation of fish, connecting with economy and society. But analyzing for villages, for researcher villages, analyzing that means a reflection of their lived experience, the problems they have faced, and unequal power relation they have encountered. So analyzing data for villages in Thai Baan research is an analysis of their social life. Thus, the Thai Baan research is not separate from the real social life of the people. So this is a brief introduction of Thai Baan research, and I will be interested in hearing question and answer the question that you have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ajahn Chayan. I think there's a lot to unpack in this approach to Thai Baan, so I think it is worth opening up to some questions at this stage. Particularly, sorry, Samarthya, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. It was a very interesting background information about Thai Baan. The key question for me is, I'm sure there must be documented evidence about the work that is going on with regards to Thai Baan. But what I'm more interested is how has this research by the villagers impacted on the livelihoods? Are there some documented evidence about the livelihood improvements that we have seen so far?
The Baan research, which our colleagues, particularly Dr. China Rong and us, did 20 years ago, was a co-production of knowledge by villagers and NGOs and academics, and we produced a report on that. However, the result or the finding of this kind of the prototype of Baan research, even though it has been publicized and also given to the policymaker, but the recommendation and the demand, the negotiation by the villagers were not well accepted by the government. However, what we learned and what we were quite pleased is that this approach has been well adapted by other researchers and other villagers, NGOs and some academic, not only in Thailand, but also in Cambodia, in Laos and Vietnam, and in Myanmar. Right? So in that sense, the direct impact of our research may not be efficient enough or efficacious enough to change the policy, but it has raised a lot of attention to the environmental problems and the right of the people.
Thank you, Ajahn Chayan. And I think Samadhi will hear a little bit more in the other presentations about some of these issues. But I think it is worth flagging, as Ajahn Chayan said, that maybe the nature of the problem is itself particularly challenging. So the challenging state approaches to development and large state-sponsored projects is itself a major political challenge as well. Peter, sorry, you have your hand up as well.
Thank you, Richard. I have a question for Ajahn Chayan related to the presentation. So I understand then that the Baan research began with the case of the resistance by villagers to Pak Mun Dam. And as someone then who studies rural social movements, I'm curious to know the relationship between this Baan research led by villagers and social movements also involving the villagers also in the resistance, like Assembly of the Poor, Samacha Konchon for Home is also an emblematic case of struggle. So how did the research articulate or not articulate with the social movement? Thank you.
It is in fact, the birth of Baan research is in the middle of the Assembly of the Poor movement during that time. Right? The leading members of the Assembly of the Poor also participate in the collection and supporting the villagers in collecting our research. This approach also has, to some extent, helped the Pak Mun people, particularly the Assembly of the Poor, in flag or in making their demand known to the government and to the public. So I think both Assembly of the Poor facilitate the research that the villagers did, and the Baan research also support the movement at that time.
Thank you, Ajahn Chayan and Peter, for the question. I think actually that leads very nicely into Ajahn Chainarong's presentation, which will draw on this history of how Baan emerged. Ajahn Fiat, Okay. Okay, thank you.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, all clear, thank you.
Good morning, colleagues from York, and good afternoon, colleagues in Thailand. I would like to present about the brief history and methodology of Thai Baan research. As Ajahn Chayan says, in 1990s, Thai society concerned about the community rights and social and environmental impacts from development. If we look back to that decade, we will find that villagers protest organize a protest against large-scale development projects across the country, particularly dam construction and power plant construction. States claim that EIA and EHIA, which they use for decision-making process, is based on scientific knowledge, and they always exclude the other forms of knowledge, such as traditional ecological knowledge. The conflict between the government and the villagers reflects the failure of EIA and EHIA, which conducted by consultant company, and this reflects the crisis of knowledge for this decision-making process. So NGOs, academics, and villagers try to find the way to conduct the research to counter, to criticize the EIA, and they also established Thai Baan research to encounter the knowledge produced by state and consultants company. So the first Thai Baan research conducted in 2001 and 2002 in the area affected by Pak Moon Dam, which built on the Moon River. The Moon River is the large-scale tributary of the Mekong. This dam funded by the World Bank. In 2001, after the long protest at the dam site, the government agreed to open the dam gate to investigate the impact for 1 year. Then villagers start to collect data by supporting from NGOs and academics. The research aimed to compare the data between before dam construction, during dam operation, and after dam sluice gate opening. We developed simply method to collect baseline data on fish species first.
Ajahn Fiat, sorry, is your slide presentation working? I'm not. We're still on the first page.
Sorry. It is okay?
No, we're just seeing the cover page.
Sorry, I will try to. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So our methodology to collect the data very simply. First, we collect the data on fish species which return to the Moon River after the dam gate opening by first step fishermen and volunteer we call as a research assistant, collect fish species which return to the Moon River, and then we take a photo of fish species, and we organize group discussion on identify fish species and explain fish characteristics, and research assistant record and writing the report. So we can collect a lot of fish species which return to the Moon River, and Then we explain to the other aspects which villagers mentioned that each aspect very important for their livelihoods. For example, socio-cultural and livelihoods, riverine ecosystem, natural vegetable and herb, fishing method, fishing gear and rice regime of fishermen, and riverbank vegetable garden. So, for example, this is the ecosystem of the Moon River, which are rich of rapids along the affected area of Baan Moon Dam, and this kind of traditional fishing gear, which now is stopped because the dam gate closed and operation again, and we can know that in the area affected by Baan Moon Dam, they are not farmers, but they are fishermen, and their economic system is a fish economy. So we can see that fish very important for the villager, both in terms of economy and food security. So we can see that people not only at Baan Moon Dam that depend on fishing in the Moon River, but also the people from upland which are far away from the river. So this is the knowledge which produced by the Thai Baan, that we publish a book and posters of fish species in the Moon River, but all information and names of the fish are local, based on local knowledge. So after the Baan Moon Thai Baan research completes, we explain Thai Baan research methodology to many places in Thailand and our neighbor. In 2004, we conduct the Thai Baan research at the Mekong River along Thai-Lao border in Chiang Rai, which Thai, Lao, China, and Burma have a plan to blasting the rapids in this area. So this is a species which collect from Thai Baan methodology. And in 2005, we conduct this research. We done this research at Rasi Salai Dam, that's located upper in the middle part of the Moon River, and also conduct in lower Songkhram River, which Richard also worked in that area during that time. In 2005, we also conduct the Thai Baan research at the Sarawin River along Thai-Burmese border, because the Thai government has a plan to build many dams along this transboundary river. And 2006, not only me, Richard also involved in the Thai Baan research in Stung Treng, Cambodia. In Stung Treng, they call the Thai Baan research as a Salapum research, that's similar to Thai Baan. And in this area, the people who are Khmer and Lao and Laotian and some ethnic groups involved in this this research, and we can publish a book about the Salapum research in Khmer. And 2016, so I adopt the Thai Baan research to conduct the research called as a Vijay Mahalai, or how to say the sea research, something like that, the Sea University research at Andaman Sea, Krabi province, because the Thai government plan to build coal power plant in this area, but the area very rich of the biodiversity. So I apply the methodology to to conduct the research in this area. You can see that we publish a book content of marine species such as crab and many species, about 500 species. And the information, I'm sorry, it is in Thai. The information, including name and the characteristic of each species, is based on local knowledge of the fishermen at Krabi, at the Andaman Sea. So we also are doing a map of ecosystem and marine species. This map shows the seagrass and species in the sea, which and this map is created by my students and fishermen who have no intimate knowledge about the area they use for fishing for generations. The research not only focus on natural resource but also focus on health impact assessments from coal power plant. So this is the last one of Thai-Baan research which complete, but now I still support the villager in Northeast Thailand to conduct the Thai-Baan research in the potash mining in Northeast Thailand. And in my opinion, Thai-Baan research is the weapon of the weak in the context of politics of knowledge and injustice development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Fiat. That's fantastic. Thank you. I mean, I have a few questions, but perhaps we could open it up to the floor first. See if anybody would like to ask any questions to Ajahn Fiat. I can't actually see everybody.
Ajahn Surichai just
Yes, I saw. Yeah. Oh, Swadee Krap, Ajahn Surichai.
Ajahn Sawadee Krap.
Ajahn Fiat, can I ask a question? Because you were talking about the science of the EIA for Pak Moon. Maybe you could say a little bit more about what the original EIA said about local livelihoods and local people.
So the EIA of the dam project, it's mentioned that the people at Pak Moon Dam are ordinary Isan people because of their livelihoods and economics depend on rice farming. But for the people at Pak Moon, they are fishermen, they are not farmers. That's quite a deficient. That's why the people at Pak Moon, how to say, they protest against them for 3 decades because the EIA lack of the information about the livelihoods and including the lack of the data of the fish species, which is very important for the local people.
Right, thank you. And maybe, oh, sorry, Rob, you have a question. Good.
Yeah, well, just following up on that, really. I mean, obviously EIAs or SEAs is the sort of tool which normally these types of projects are investigated, or their potential social and environmental impacts are investigated. Is there any thought of how that EIA, SEA community is taking on Thai-Baan approaches, or are they? Is that something which is getting taken up by the EIA community?
Ajahn Fiat? Did you, so Rob's question, did you catch that?
Sorry.
It was, sorry.
Yes, it was just taking on that idea. So obviously EIAs are the normal mechanism which these types of things are investigated. Is Thai-Baan being taken up by the EIA community at all in terms of how they maybe do the EIAs or SEAs differently?
So I can say that after after the Thai Baan research accepted by Thai society, but the consultant company who conduct the EIA of the projects after the Bang Moon Dam project, they try to do similar Thai Baan research, and they call that this use Thai Baan research, but actually it's not Thai Baan research. It is still depend on I call laboratory lab rather than traditional ecological knowledge, and it's a lack of people participation in the research, in the process.
Okay, so they try to capture the sort of spirit, but they don't actually.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
use the
Claim. Yes.
Thank
But
you.
maybe this is, sorry.
In case of Krabi coal power plant, the consultant company and EGAT, not EGAT, yes, they claim they conduct the EIA. Some part is comply with the Thai Baan research, but actually it's not Thai Baan research.
But I think, Rob, this is a good question we could open up for later discussion, because I think it speaks to Ajahn Chayan's point about conscientization and who leads the research, who owns the research, and who does the analysis, who represents the findings. And I think this is what one of the features of Thai Baan that's very special and different from usual approaches, the sort of usual participatory approaches or usual citizen science approaches. Bobby, I see you got your hand up, but do you think could we wait a little bit?
It's a general question, so I'm happy.
Yeah, okay, that's all right, because I think it would be useful to hear from Ajahn. We have Ajahn Mali next, and then Ajahn Pacharin, and then we can have a sort of a broader discussion. Thanks very much, Rob. Ajahn Mali, are you? I can't see you now. Oh, yes. Are you okay to make your presentation now? Thank you. Okay, so we can see your presentation. Ajahn Mali, I think you're still on mute. Sorry.
Okay, my presentation topic is a community-based research of the Thai Puan community as a counter to hegemonic knowledge. For my research, I conduct the research on 2018, maybe 20 late from Ajahn Chayan and Ajahn Fiat. And why I conduct this research. You can see the Khong River. And the upper Khong River, a lot of them constructed already. And the place, the village I study is a Baan Klang village. They are Thai Puan. And this presentation is a part of my research project. In my research project, I conducted 4 communities. But for this presentation, I present only on Baan Klang. And for this research, it funded by Community-Based Research Division, Thailand Research Fund, and aiming to use research method to solve community problems. And you can see that Baan Klang village, Baan Klang community is near to Khong River, and also located on the Loi River. What happened in this village? And for this village, Thai Puan 2 communities, and these are big communities, around 1,085 population. But for this village, Baan Klang is surrounded by Thai Isan community, Baan Kok Mat, Baan Bon, and Baan Gang Mi. And those are affected by the Patu Rabai Nam Si Song Rak. What happened? I will show you later. But only Baan try to send their voice that they objective to the flat grade, sea song luck flat grade. Why? Because this is the giant tamarind tree. This is planted when the community established in this area. For this tamarind tree, maybe over 100 years ago. And when I first met with the villagers at the end of 2018, and first we did not know each other before, but they told us that they were informed the Sea Song Rak Fat grade would be built in the river mouth, in the river mouth in 2013. They were concerned about flooding in the village. And villagers have three major complaints. The first one, there were no discussion or participate. No discussion, it means that the Royal Irrigation Department official no discussion with the villagers at all. And the villagers also concerned a lot about the flooding, because for this village, they hit by two floods in 1978 and 2002. And also this project later, it adding by the word Royal Initiative Project, make the villagers feel powerless to argue. And for this show that you can see that Sea Song Rak Flat grade is here. And along this Mekong River, and also Le River, and the Baan Klang in here. And the river for the Sea Song Rak Flat grade, it claimed that it for expand the farming area, but in fact the Le River is not used by Baan Klang villagers for farming, but is used as a sort of food. And the fat grade, if the fat grade build up, it will be useless, and will be cause the river ecosystem to fluctuate, and it has a significant impact on the community's food supply. And this, I would like to show the this irrigation department called flood grade, not called dam, but in fact it is a dam. The villagers said that Sea Song Rak Flat grade as a dam without EIA. Why no EIA? Because for the irrigation area, it only 656 acres. It not until 80,000 acres. If the irrigation area cover 80,000 acres, it have to do EIA. And the river is not the country's main river. Moreover, the Sea Song Rak, the irrigation official said that for the this Sea Song Rak Flat grade, it not related to Khong Loi Chi Moon Water Diversion Project. And for the Khong Loi Chi Moon Water Diversion Project, it invests around 60,000 million US dollar. And 2000, when I met them, 2018, the villagers know the irrigation department will construct the floodgate in 2013. And they try to help themselves to submit a letter for objection the Sea Song Rak to many government agencies, including National Human Rights Commission. And 2018, I and Ajahn Chayan went to this village and I talked with them. And we think that we should apply a community-based research to help them. And what we have done, the first one, collecting data, capacity building, empowerment, and make the network. For the correct data, they got the data is different from the department, education department. They can correct data and show that the biodiversity of the river and many kind of fish and bird and vegetable. And moreover, I ask the villagers to calculate the value to the month as the price. So the whole years they can, if they rely on living in the river, rely on the river, they can this for this for consumption in the household allow more than to เท่าไหร่อ่านไม่ออก it too much more than 526. Yes, I showed this one. Okay, and moreover the third one is the tributaries in the Baan Klang area. In the feasibility project it done by irrigation department, the report, it said that only 3 tributaries, but when the villagers collect data, they show that there are 18 tributaries. And when we see the river is only the flow of water. And how can we understand how do they use the river? So we ask the villagers to do something we call cultural mapping. Cultural mapping. This picture is also the same areas, but for this one, it's drawing by the villagers, and we can see ecosystem of the Baan Klang. It many kinds of the name in on the river, the name and deep water area, and many kinds of name of the ecosystem. It means that many kind of fish and the knowledge they use. And this I also many, yeah. And also the fish gear. I asked the villagers to draw the fish gear, and many kinds of fish gear they draw for us to show that. And I think that for cultural mapping, when I use this method, I want to emphasize it as a process, not as the output or outcome. And I think that to the cultural mapping to stakeholder for Thai Puan people, we emphasize their local knowledge, and we give a space for their debate on the use of river space, and also to demonstrate a more comprehensive value system. And natural resources should be valued and protected for next generation. But I think that for cultural mapping should demonstrate that how the river differ from other rivers. And they should see that not only functional benefit, but including value, local knowledge, and for cultural mapping to show that local knowledge, human and nature relationship, and also to show that major food resources for local people. I think that for cultural mapping, at least to create an understanding of the local cultural ecosystem, and as a more tool for emphasize the local voice. And this what I summarize. For community-based research, we use the participatory action research, and it means that researchers from CMU and community research team work together, and also transdisciplinary learning. It means that it not only researcher and community research, it also the other discipline. We also invite many lecturer from science faculty to give information, and the NGO to learn and exchange in this project. And the word conversation, I think that conversation is not only interview. That is why I focus on conversation. It informal talking between all the partner. And after for this, I think we can produce co-production of knowledge. And for this knowledge, I have shown that it differs from the Royal Irrigation Department report. Only co-production of knowledge. It not, I think that if we said that co-production of knowledge can counter hegemonic knowledge, it not, I think that maybe we overclaim. I think the movement, how to use the co-product that knowledge to counter hegemonic knowledge. This is my presentation.
Thanks very much, Ajahn Mali. I think that's a powerful note to finish on about the relationship between co-production of knowledge and the movement. Again, can we open up for questions? Sorry, Ajahn Mali, could you? Oh, great. Could we open up the floor for some specific questions or questions of clarification for Ajahn Mali? Maybe I can ask. Oh, does anybody? I don't want to jump in if other people have questions, but I think there's an interesting question about Ajahn Mali. You mentioned that this project, the Floodgate project, was part of a much larger program that was rebranded. So as part of the Kongchimun project, and they rebranded it as a way of avoiding doing a proper EIA. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Piran, sorry. Piran, you're muted.
You showed a table at the end which had the community values or the cultural values, and then the sort of researchers' policy sort of perspective on this. And I wasn't quite sure what is it that they both look at the same thing in different ways, or is it that is it just that that's the way that those community values are expressed to have traction with policy? I wasn't quite sure that the point there that you were trying to make, because some of the things seem to be quite similar, but is it the way that they're expressed that's key for decision makers?
Richard, can you help me?
So there was a table towards the end where you presented different perspectives, I think, from community and outsiders. So it's just perhaps to clarify what that table represents, what that table shows us.
And to Taiwan.
Yeah,
This one. Our policymakers on this one.
Yes, for this, I think that for cultural mapping, it makes use for different stakeholders. For Thai Puan people, it useful for emphasizing their local knowledge in the left side, but it will be useful for the policy makers, engineering, and all the other who don't use or related to the River. So the outsider, they always see that liver is a liver. Liver is not a major food resources for the local people. This I try to separate. Yeah. And in fact, I want to, if it's possible, I want to use a cultural mapping as a space, exchange space for the different stakeholders to see that how the local people use the liver or the liver. Yeah.
Okay, so the left-hand column is for what it means to people themselves, and the right-hand column is what it means for how they engage with others, outsiders. Darren, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bobby. You have a question?
Please. Sawasdee Krap, Ajahn Chan, Ajahn Mali. It's really good to Sawasdee Krap. It's really good to see you again. If I could be a little cheeky, I have kind of two questions. The first is I would just like to hear kind of your broad reflections. This is to everyone on the extent to which I guess the resurgence of local knowledge that's associated with Thai Baan, to what extent it challenges or potentially transforms hegemonic or dominant understandings of national identity in Thailand, or to what extent its agenda can contribute to challenging kind of dominant understandings of national identity. So I'm thinking, the context in which a lot of this research originates is in a very obviously diverse part of the country in the north and the northeast. So that's the first question. And the second one is, I wonder if this conscientization of villagers that the research addresses speaks to broader struggles of belonging that might have applicability in non-agrarian contexts. So I'm thinking in terms of urban migrants and the knowledges of so-called outsiders in Thai society. Thank you very much.
Bobby, I think these are great questions that speak to the heart of what this session is about. So I'm going to be very rude and suggest that we come back to those, but we will pose them at the end.
Okay,
I think we should really hear from Ajahn Pacharin and Ajahn Surichai first, and then I think you've really sort of hit some key questions there. So I do apologize for putting them on one side for the moment.
No worries, Richard. No worries.
And I think in the interest of time as well, perhaps we could move on and invite Ajahn Pacharin to make a presentation, please.
Thank you. I will share a slide. Did you see my slide?
Yes, it's working
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
Okay. 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 Good morning, participants in Canada, and good afternoon for Thai colleagues. I'd like to thank Dr. Richard and Ajahn Chian for giving me an opportunity to share my experience of reviewing the community-based research project in northeast of Thailand, which was supported by Thai Research Fund. Actually, my presentation may be different from Ajahn Mali and Ajahn Chainalong or even Ajahn Chian. I am not doing the research, but I review the research project. I want to start with giving a brief information about 3RF. 3RF is, the main role of 3RF is to assist the development of research-based knowledge to providing research grants. 3RF complies of 10 divisions, including the Community-Based Research Division or CBR. CBR aims to empower and strengthen local communities through research. Its philosophy is to solve the problems of the people, by the people, and for the people in the communities. CBR does not conform strictly to conventional academic research, but focuses more on the participatory process of local agents in identifying research questions and searching for appropriate way to local context in solving problems. CBR projects are conducted in collaboration with various agencies, such as local people and organizations, government and non-government organizations, and universities. CBR division have granted support to various aspects of community development, including natural resource management, sustainable and organic agriculture, community history and culture, and alternative education. The project that I focus, the group that I focus on is the local rice seeds production group, which was selected as one of the so-called best practice projects of CBR regarding its systematic research methodology and good results, especially in terms of knowledge production that empower local people in solving their problems. Within 10 years, this group was granted 4 projects, and the recent support in 2019 as the Center for Transforming of Organic Agriculture Innovation marked the success of the groups. This group located in the district of Kuchum, Yasothon province, which have a long history of organic agriculture practices. And almost 50% of farmers in this province grow organically. This group also a part of an organization promoting sustainable agriculture in Isan called the Alternative Agriculture Network. The group got funding from TRF through this network, and the network has served as the key mentor for the research team. Here are Mr. Dao Leung, the chairman of the group, and Mr. Wanna, the secretary. Both men have actively involved in CBR at the beginning. They have played a main role in all research steps. Their participation is important for the success of the group. To elaborate on how CBR have been operated on the ground, I focus on the first project that granted by TRF, that is the study of local rice species as an example. The research process of this study include 4 major steps. Start with developing research questions, working with the Alternative Agriculture Network for more than 30 years. Farmers in this area become aware of the effects of chemical farming on their health and local food system. Chemical farming also requires high investment, making many farmers become in debt. Based on such effects, farmers question the 2 rice varieties promoted by Thai government, which needs chemical fertilizers and pesticides to get good yields. They rather want to grow the same rice species as their parents and grandparents did in the past, which did not use chemicals. Therefore, they proposed to TRF to study local rice species and to find out how to promote local variety. Mr. Dao Leung, the chairman of the group, said that at the beginning, he had no idea what CBR is. He knows that he wants to learn about local rice species, why they are disappear, and how to protect and breed local species and distributed them to farmers. In terms of research participation, the research team identified 12 households in 3 study villages which have cultivated local rice and include them in the team. Then the team organized a meeting in each village to provide information about the research, to find key informants who know local rights, and to identify farmers who want to join an experiment aiming to develop a guideline for producing organic rice seeds. Although research team have a lot of experience on organic agriculture, they did not have research skill. So the mentor, which is work with the Alternative Agricultural Network, organized a workshop to train them how to collect data, to develop and use research tools such as household survey questionnaires, production calendar, and ecological maps, and so on. Such tools were used in collecting data for the project. In the process of data collection, Mr. Dao Leung and Wanna told me that the mentor have organized several meetings to discuss, summarize, and make sense of information that the farmer researcher have collected. The results of their information show that there are 62 species that were cultivated in this area in the past, and 23 species have been cultivated until now, but with a very small plot for home consumption only. And 39 species were disappeared, but the research team could correct species information and develop database for all 62 species of rice. Another important aspects of research is field experiments, which were carried out at both farmer paddy to produce organic rice seeds, and at the experiment fields of the group to protect and breed local species. In designing and carrying out experiment, the research team got support not solely from the mentor from the NGO, but also plant breeding specialists from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives. In addition, the research team also developed the procedure for organic rice seeds production, including 7 steps as shown on the slide. And the research also trained the group of people they call the investigating team to work with farmers. Now, the groups work with 35 households and produce 30 tons of 10 species of organic rice seeds per year, which is not enough for local demands. The quality of seeds produced by the groups meet the requirement of good quality seeds by the National Bureau of Agricultural Commodity and Food Standards. Okay. So to conclude, it is still to be discussed whether the way this group conducted the research is Thai Baan methodology, or whether it is a co-production of knowledge, as Ajahn Mali did, which is the co-production of knowledge between farmer, non-government, and government organization. But what is quite clear is that CBR supports farmer and local community to protect and improve local rice species, to obtain healthy food, and to define their own agricultural production in an environmentally, economically, and culturally appropriate to their circumstances. It also allows farmers to reject the promoted rice species which threaten their health and livelihoods. In this light, these research associate with food sovereignty of local people and local community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Pacharin. It's fantastic. I think, you rightly point to the whole process of research as an empowering process for communities, and this principle in Thailand that communities, local people should be able to solve their own development problems. I think that's really significant. And as you say, there's an interesting discussion whether, to what extent we would classify this as Thai Baan or sort of villager-led or co-production or community-based. So thanks very much. Can we again open up the floor for some questions before I get in? Oh, sorry, I was just about to ask, and then Kelly, have you got your hand up? Yeah.
I did. So one of the things that I think this is incredibly valuable, and I appreciate hearing everyone's discussions today, introducing us more to the ideas, and it's incredibly valuable as an approach. But sometimes it seems like it's easier to bring people along. The last discussion about rice breeding, that's you can understand why broader communities would jump on that and engage with that. But the previous talk about the damming and the local people downstream relative to the upstream, there seemed to be a disconnect perhaps between those communities in terms of what was desirable. And I was wondering how you as researchers manage that. Is there a desire to actually interact and consolidate feeling across a broader community, or are you really targeting just one community at a time? And how, if you do want to expand it, how do you do that when you've got potential for disconnect between kind of interests?
Thanks, Kelly. So Ajahn Pacharin, do you want to respond to that? And then perhaps we can open that up for a wider discussion to the other speakers as well.
Yeah, my quick answer is that I am not working with the community, but I review what the funding that they have got from TRF, and I review their work. But I also going to 3 villages that they have do the research and talk with the villagers and other people. And the thing is that about 10% of households in the 3 villages that participate in this activity, which is, of course, it is not all villages that involved, but only 10%. Thank you.
It's a good question, Kelly. I think let's do some other quick questions and then open that up for to hear from our other speakers. Indrajit, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, Richard, but it was a general question. So I don't know if I can put it up now, and then you can decide whether it should be answered right now or later.
Yeah, I think we're into that sort of general. So we've heard from sort of very different perspectives.
Yeah, okay.
So let's go for that, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm very grateful to all the presenters for talking to us about this counter-hegemonic research, and it's really interesting, especially to tie it in with what one has heard about similar processes elsewhere in Asia and Latin America. One of the things that was striking from one of the presentations, and I wondered how you sort of think about it, is, you all mentioned about debates within the local community in terms of, what is good for them. And, the community is never, as you've also pointed out, a homogeneous single unit. There are always views and voices and disagreements within the community. How did that impact your research, and how did you sort of ensure that different voices within the community, found their representation in what was said? So I'd be very interested to hear that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Indrajit. So I think that fits nicely with Kelly's question about how, about the nature of questions and how you engage to broader groups of people across different communities or across a landscape. I don't know if Ajahn Chayan or Ajahn Fiat would like to respond to that as well.
In Park Moon case, the in the village, we can divide people or villagers into two groups. First, the group will support the dam, and the second, the group will against the dam. So, but at the beginning, when we start to collect the information, so we have fishermen, about 20 fishermen. But after many people come to see attend the first presentation. So people, many of them are concerned about their natural resource which link to their livelihoods. So that's why we explain the aspect into the other aspects, such as riverbank vegetable garden or fishing gear, something like that, because people want to engage more. More people want to engage in the research. And finally, we have about 200 villagers who would join as a Thai Baan researcher because how to say, because they want to they concern about their livelihoods and natural resource, and they want to show the information to the public. During the research process, we try to have people who who support the dam to involve in the activities that we organize. So I can see that the conflict between these two groups before the research conduct is very high, but after we organize a group discussion and workshop for presenting the report, so I see people, the conflict among the people is decreased. In this in case of Park Moon and everywhere, because if when we start to talk about the dam, it will have a conflict. But in Thai Baan process, we did not start from talking about the dam, but start from the reality of the area that's a link to their life, their livelihoods.
Thanks, Danfit. Yeah, I think this question about how you frame the research questions or how people frame them themselves is really interesting.
It is because we did not choose the research problem. I think Ajahn Fiat and I, and Mali, it's the villagers who choose their research problem. So it's not we impose the research question to them, and so that in that case there can be kind of two groups of people, those who agree with the research problem and those who do not.
Thanks very much, Ajahn Chayan. We still have Bobby's questions about conscientization and identity, because I think, as Bobby pointed out, the areas where Thai Baan has been carried out in Thailand and in Cambodia and Myanmar are predominantly ethnic minorities or more marginalized people. So I wonder if anyone would like to respond to Bobby's question about conscientization and sense of identity. I'm also aware that Ajahn Surichai has joined us.
The question of identity, I think the case of Park Moon, as Ajahn Fiat has told us, it's clear that the Thai Baan research allowed them to provide information and assert their own identity from being seen as rice farmers to fishermen. So they can demonstrate that, in fact, the way they and their parents have lived in that area is based upon the riverine resources, based upon rice, based upon fish, and the knowledge about fish species and riverine ecosystem show that their identity is well connected to their locality or their place. Right? I think in the case of other places, like in Baan Klang, for example, the question of Baan Klang is that they also allow them to tell the other people that who they are through the study of their own local history, like, for example, the tamarind trees that they pointed out, for example.
Maybe I could just add one short thing before we invite Ajahn Surichai to speak to us. Is that the villagers who started in Pakmun then they became the trainers of Thai Baan researchers in other places. So they went to Songkram, trained the people in Songkram. The people in Songkram then went to Stung Treng in Cambodia, all speaking Lao as a sort of common language, all referring to themselves as Thai Baan, as villagers. So you have this sort of growing network of conscientization across the Mekong region. And one of the things that I remember from one of the reflection sessions that the Thai Baan group organized, where they invited Thai Baan researchers from different parts of the country together, is one of the things that people said was that through Thai Baan, they'd learned much more about each other and each other's livelihoods and circumstances, which I thought was really, really telling as well, so beyond the specific case.
But I would like to add that when in this case, conscientization doesn't mean outsider tell them who they are or what kind of problem they have, but it's through the process of data collection, through the process of realization of the problem that they are facing or would face by the infrastructure development from the government, so they become aware of the situation by themselves.
Yes, thank you, Ajahn Chayan. I'm aware that we're coming quite close to the end. I wonder if Ajahn Surichai would like to
Yes.
offer some reflections. Thank you.
I can join very briefly. I think making sense making sense about this Thai Baan in the context of today discussion among us in Thailand as well as with you. I think it does really for me is quite very interesting and very eye-opening to relate my sense making with even the Thai researchers. So that is the first. So because the power relations in the context of knowledge and evidence have really been a serious problem in the struggle for justice among us. But that is my first point. So second point is in Thailand still the methodological issue when Ajahn Pacharin mentioned about CBR, and when you Ajahn Fiat mentioned about the Thai Baan, you can see the gaps somewhere that methodologically speaking, the Thai Baan with the roots from the Pakmun and other efforts until the anti power plant in the south, Ajahn Fiat mentioned on one hand. The other hand, the CBR is another language, which is a bit more common language with the National Research Funding Organization. So it's not very much about power context of power relations of knowledge, but more to support the people, the community or whatever. So a bit vague. So along that line, I think when I said about this, I mean, it is with the international context of high research in social science and science, I think we do still have homework to do with how to make this issue a legitimate place in the status and role of this. But now my last point relates to this. Because of this, in a broader sense, I think conscientization issue have a broader context of this realization that even Chaole that Ajahn Phiet mentioned have become non-identity people in Thailand. No documents, but they become a part of our own broader being conscientized as we allow the tourist industries dominate the coastal areas too much, so that the sea, whatever we call as sea nomads were the Chaole were taken lightly. But in the context of today, in the last decade, we see the recognition that we need to support and we need to recognize the coastal resources more in the context of the local knowledge along the kind of methodological approaches that Ajahn Mali also have been doing in Baan Klang. So I just would like to say that my last point relates to how we relate to the broader grounding of conscientization in terms of development question and power relations that I think we are opening up along that line. We are having some new sense of identity in a broader say justice struggle, but just to join with you. Yeah. So I appreciate, I think the context discussing this in a broader comparative or broader global would be of interest in the next minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Surichai. I think, again, those comments speak very neatly to concerns we have here at York about how we decolonize research, how the overall purpose of research, what the role of academia, universities is in addressing these, challenges that are fundamentally about power and justice. And I hope that this is a conversation that we will have together as we move forward. I'm very much aware of the time, that we only have a couple of minutes left, and I know that Peter also wanted to offer some reflections.
Yes, thank you. Oops, let me stop this. No.
Peter, sorry, you're on mute. Sorry. Oh. Right, we have some technical issues, I'm afraid.
I cannot hear you, Peter.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. So I'm thanking Ajahn Chayan for the invitation, and Richard also for the opportunity to be here, and Ajahn Surichai for having made the original connection. And I was asked to link up this wonderful, marvelous experience of Thai Baan research with perhaps what goes on in Latin America. And I should say that I'm a professor in Mexico, and I'm also a former staff of La Via Campesina, the global peasant movement, where we carry out a lot of participatory action research as movement activity. And so I was very much struck by the connections between this wonderful experience of the Thai Baan participatory action research and Latin American roots. For example, Ajahn Chayan mentioned the inspiration of Paulo Freire, and I wanted to mention another very important Latin American thinker from the 1970s on, Orlando Files Borda, who in Latin America and Latin American social movements we see as one of the original people who gave rise to participatory action research. And I was so struck by the similarities, including the origin in Pakmun Dam and the river people with the work of Orlando Falls Borda, that I just wanted to read a couple of quotes to show the similarity to you, if I can just find them here. 1 second. I have it right here. Yes. So Falls Borda, who in Latin America we see as having originated the participatory action research, he began working with what he called peasants in what he called an amphibious region, where he narrates the agrarian history of the Colombian coastal plain and recounts in considerable detail the research, this participatory research methodology. But here's the important part. Amphibious is a metaphor that conveys how the region's rural denizens live, fish, and farm on the riverbanks of the river. And so he calls this an amphibious culture. And I think the description of the people who live in Pakmun that we heard from Chayan and from Chaynarong, and also in the similar experience with Malay, is very similar to this amphibious culture that was the inspiration for Falls Borda, who was one of the originators of participatory action research. And since I've worked with La Via Campesina, I was struck how La Via Campesina actually runs through these different experiences. Falls Borda worked with the organization ANUC, ANUC in Colombia, in his work with the amphibious people. And ANUC is one of the original peasant and fisher folk organizations in La Via Campesina. And the Baan research began in Pakmun Dam with Assembly of the Poor, Samachak Konchon, also one of the long-term, very important members of La Via Campesina. And finally, the wonderful work that Pacharin described with the seeds and organic rice is very similar to self-research carried out in Latin America by the landless workers movement, the MST of La Via Campesina, which enabled them to gather their own knowledge, their own rice seeds, and become the largest producer of organic rice anywhere in Latin America. So very similar to that experience. And I want to just close by saying in La Via Campesina, we use this kind of participatory action research, not just for helping people to struggle against bad development projects like Pakmun Dam, but also to transform their own reality, for example, through agroecology. So through processes of peasant-to-peasant research and sharing, peasants in the community do inventory of all the different agroecological practices that the different members of the village or the community have. And they do their own inventory of all of the problems, and they match how the different kinds of knowledge of the different members of the community can match with the different kinds of the solutions and the problems in the community can be matched together so that the community can collectively solve their own problems based on their own knowledge. So what I want to say is that I see enormous similarity between the Latin American branch of participatory action research, the experience here in Thailand, the relationship between this research and social movements being part of where the research takes place, and how the research can be transformed into larger policy change, and how La Via Campesina and these organizations run through these experiences, both in Latin America and here in what we've heard from the Baan research. So I just want to close by congratulating so much our Thai colleagues. I think, as Ajahn Chayan suggested, it's really beyond participatory because it's villager-led. I think this is one of the key elements. Another key element is, as he said, the conscientization is not somebody else coming from the outside to raise people's consciousness, but it's a process by which people raise their own consciousness. And then finally, once again, the setting in the rural social movement, how researchers and research can have a larger impact is through the social movement. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And And as Ajahn Surichai said at the end of his remarks, maybe the next stage then will be international exchange of these kind of experiences, because seeing the similarities with this Latin American tradition in social movements of the participatory action research and organizations also part of the same global movement as the Thai movement. Alternative Action Network that Pacharin mentioned is also part of La Via Campesina. La Via Campesina runs through all of these experiences. In fact, it's sort of the hidden actor or the hidden network that connects them all. So perhaps in the future, we'll have an international exchange of experience with this marvelous case from Thailand. So thank you so much.
Peter, thanks very much. I think that's brilliant. You've very neatly tied together some really powerful key messages from this experience, and very grateful for the drawing on that Latin American experience, which is completely new to me. I love this notion of amphibious researchers, but also the sort of, the focus on these particular kinds of geographies, ecosystems where much of this conflict takes place, I think is really interesting. And if that's a recommendation that we should be working together more across different parts of the world around these areas, then that's something that I would be very keen to support and be involved in. And we have had some efforts of bringing colleagues together from Taiwan with colleagues working in the conflict in Israel-Palestine as well. So I'm enormously grateful for our friends from Thailand for making time for the discussion today. And I hope this is just an introductory session that we can bring other friends in York together with Thailand and Latin America now. But to close, Ajahn Chayan, would you like to perhaps say some final thoughts?
Well, I don't have much to say except that to answer Bobby's question with regard to how Taiwan research or conscientization approach can be used in the urban setting. I think we have done this kind of research with among the people who live in slums area in Chiang Mai, as well as in Mandalay. So it's quite an interesting process. But in the case of the slum, we have less experience than working with the agrarian communities in Thailand. Right? But it's the people in slum, they really want to use this method in telling the story about how they have been excluded from urban development. Right? Yeah.
Thanks, Ajahn Chayan. Maybe that's something that John, Bobby and I can pick up in a related project and have further discussions with you on how that might be put into practice. Does anybody have any final points, any comments? I'm aware it's getting quite late in Thailand, and I know many of our York colleagues have had to leave because they have other commitments. Okay, I think in that case, I'd just like to thank everybody. Ajahn Chayan, Ajahn Viet, Ajahn Mali, Ajahn Pacharin, thanks so much for making the presentations. Ajahn Surichai, we're always enormously grateful for your words of wisdom, and Peter as well. Thank you so much. Let's try and organize similar discussions where we're a bit more familiar with the context of Taiwan. We can perhaps go into more detailed discussions about how we could collaborate and what kind of engagement we could support each other with. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much on behalf of the Thai team. Thank you very much, Richard and Peter and Ajahn Surichai, who be with us and give us some opportunity to share what we have done, and also opportunity for exchange in the future. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
สวัสดีค่ะ
ครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ Take care.
ครับอาจารย์สุริชัย